So in the next chapter, we have to focus on land as a resource, soil, water, natural vegetation and wildlife resources. In this, land I will be showing you some factual information. Soil is very important. You may get in mains about soil. Water conservation, to some extent it's fine. Natural vegetation and wildlife resources, mostly important from environment and ecology point of view. So let's see what are these. Only one important information with respect to land is in do you know. 90% of the population just live in about 30% of the land area. This is the most important fact. So remaining are barren, like you may have ice caps, or you may have mountains, plateaus, forests and other things, right? So land on which human beings are present are only very small. With this small percentage, we have degraded most of the other land areas as well. So when we talk about India, about 57% of Indian land is there for crops. Pasture is only 4% that is used for grazing. That's why dairy industry is not so popular in India. And when we talk about forest, it is 22%, and for other uses, it is only 17%. So mostly we are using it for agricultural purposes. Here, the most important thing that you need to see about land is landslides. In this picture, can you observe that because of landslides, the soil, rocks and other particles have entered into the city? If it is associated with water, it may actually flow across. And sometimes if you have buildings and all, even those buildings may be bombarded by big boulders which are present in this region. So what exactly should we do, or what exactly is this? So from disaster management point of view, this is very important. So here, landslides are simply defined as the mass movement of rock, debris or earth down a slope. They often take place in conjunction with earthquakes, floods and volcanoes. The reason for this is, wherever you have earthquakes, there will be shakes, even mountains and all will shake. So if you have rocks, soil or any other particle, that will also come down. This is one reason. Second important thing, we are talking about floods. Whenever water is mixed with the soil and other things, usually there is a tendency for water to come down or particles to come down. Or just take a case where you had a big rock, right? Below the big rock there were small rocks which used to prevent this big rock from falling down. But because of the water flow, the small particles were removed over a period of time, and the big boulder will also come and fall. So that is also one reason of this. Volcanoes, whenever you have a dormant volcano or an extinct one, then everything, the rock particles and all will be associated, the rivers, all this will melt and they would have created some boulders. But whenever this extinct or dormant becomes active again, we usually observe that again there will be movement of these particles, and that will create problem in the other areas as well. Then a prolonged spell of rainfall can cause heavy landslide that can block the flow of river for quite some time. Uttarakhand floods was also associated with landslides. The formation of river blocks can cause havoc to the settlements downstream on its bursting. That is, let me take, you had a river flow. Okay. Now what happens? The sand particles or rock particles will usually stop or will usually fall here, and all water will be accumulated here. Now in these settlements, like buildings and other things which are present down, usually when this landslides are removed or rock particles are removed, suddenly there will be movement of huge water downwards. Whenever they come down, usually you observe that these settlements will be destructed. What they are saying is, whenever a river is flowing, usually the landslides will stop the flow of the river, and then suddenly when these are removed due to force of this, there will be burst of these rock particles, or they will give way, and suddenly when the water flows, they enter not through the channel but on the other sides as well. When they enter through other sides, there is a tendency that they go and hit the settlements as well. So it's important for us to look at what is the impact of landslides on these areas. In the hilly terrain, landslides have been a major and widely spread natural disaster that may actually create trouble. So they have given a case study, but not very much important for us. What is more important for us is with respect to the mitigation mechanism, that is, measures that you actually take with respect to this. Hazard mapping locate areas prone to landslides. For example, you have a mountain like this. Now, on this mountain, you actually see slope in this direction. That is, let me take a scenario where the mountain is usually in this shape. So, the slope is at the center, and here the slopes are less. Usually, if there is any shake or landslides, it will usually fall in this direction. So, first I should be aware that if I drop any rock on top, it will come and fall in this direction. By locating this, I should avoid settlements down here. But as I know that in this region, that is away from the slope, I have certain regions where I am not finding any rocks going and falling, I should actually build settlements in that region. So that is one thing that we need to see. Construction of retention wall to stop land from slipping. For example, when you have big boulders and all, just try to ensure that you have rocks kept below them. That is, if you have a boulder, have rocks below them in such a way that even if the rock comes down, these rock structures will prevent the bigger rocks from falling. So this is called as retention wall. Increase in the vegetation cover. It is usually believed that whenever you have vegetation cover, that is trees and all, whenever you grow trees, so trees usually prevent the rocks and other things to move beyond. So that will also help you. The surface drainage control works are implemented to control the movement of landslide along with rainwater and spring flows. The water, whenever it gets accumulated at the top, we should ensure that wherever the water flow, the drainage has to be proper, and that should not be slippery to bring the boulders down. So these are some of the things that we need to ensure when we are actually talking about disaster management during landslides. And please be careful, UPSC will not ask you what are the preventive measures, but they ask you what are the mitigation measures. When they ask mitigation measures, these are the points that you need to take. Preventive measures will be different, mitigation will be different, rehabilitation will be different. All these needs to be clear. Until and unless you write specific things, that is, you cannot mix preventive mechanism to mitigation mechanism, then there will be problem. So you have to avoid it. The next important thing is with respect to soil, which is the most important topic of the chapter. When I am talking about soil, you should be aware how these soils are usually formed. The very first concept about this is, let me take you have a rock. I have told you have different types of rocks, igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks, metamorphic rocks. So that is actually called as parent rock. Now, due to action of river, wind, water, groundwater or anything, usually we observe that this parent rock will be broken into pieces. That is what we call weathered rock material. And once we move above that, we usually see that the soil will have sand, silt and clay. That is, the smaller one will be above, some bigger particles will be below, and below that you have big boulders. So first you have parent rock. Let me take you have a rock, and the rock is in this structure. Above this, because of some action, this rock got broken in this fashion. Okay, so these particles got separated over a period of time. Even these are broken into smaller particles. So based on that, you usually observe that the soil particles are seen in different sizes. On top of it, topsoil will have vegetation, grass and all being grown. Whenever a tree grows, I have a rock, tree grows, so its roots also enters deep. Whenever the roots penetrate, they also break the rocks. So this will make the soil, like sand particles of thinner size. Usually it is believed that over generations, 1 meter or 10 meters of soil is being usually produced. So it's very, very important for us to know about the soil structure here. Usually UPSC will ask you about this basic question, that is, what are the factors responsible for the formation of soil? Here they may simply ask you what are the factors responsible and consider the following which are responsible for soil formation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, parent rock. Say for example you have a rock in which the boulders have only 2 and you have another rock in which there are multiple boulders. Which is easy to break? Here, see, I can break in multiple places. So because of this, the breaking is easy and also soil formation will be easy. And some rocks are prone to chemical weathering, that is, they react with water, they melt or they break and create small particles. Some rocks are actually having permeability for other chemicals which is easy to break. So all this is important. So if you have a soft rock, easy to break. If you have a hard rock, then it takes more time to make soil. And climate plays a very important role. You all know that wind, water, rainfall, all this matters a lot. I have a rock. Rainfall is actually happening on this rock, right? So over some 10-20 years, if there is continuous rainfall on this, then you will see some small holes present on that rock. And where did the particles which were present there went? It became soil. Temperature. Usually it is believed that high temperature and low rainfall in some areas usually leads to this. For example, some rocks, what happens in desert areas, because of high temperature, they expand a bit, like air and all, they get warmed up. So they expand a bit. At that point of time, when small rainfall happens, that is enough for that rock to break and form soils. I'll be taking a separate class on all these things to tell you how exactly soil is formed. When we go to 11th and 12th standard NCERT books, we will be seeing them. But I hope you understood that I am talking about temperature being a very important factor. That is, due to in cold climates, they compress. And during the warm, they extract. Due to this compression and expansion also, they break. But this takes some hundreds of years to happen. Then time is the most important factor. So if you leave more time, then the thickness of the soil will be more. If it is less time, if erosional activities and others are less, then the thickness will be less. Flora, fauna, microorganisms, human beings, plants, microorganisms, all these also contribute to the formation of soil. Relief, altitude, slope matters a lot. So if I am actually talking about a mountain which is like this and the another one like this, so on the basis of this I can say where there will be more soil formation. If I have a river flowing, then here the soil formation will be more. If I have sea waves here, then the soil formation will be more on this side. So based on this we can decide where can the soil formation be more. So you saw what is soil, different layers of soil, then you saw the factors which are actually responsible. The most important thing that we need to see is soil conservation measures. UPSC has already asked you what are the different soil conservation methods. So here you just need to talk about different soil conservation methods. They usually ask in 100 to 150 words. Here you have exactly 150 words, and if you can write it, it is more than enough. The first important layer or first important thing is about mulching. The bare ground between plants is covered with a layer of organic matter like straw. It will actually retain the soil moisture. That is, when you have two plants or two cropping patterns, in between don't give gap. Instead of that, you have some straw, like grass or so, or usually you see dried wool being present, so that whenever rainfall or something happens, it will not carry the water away, but it absorbs and makes it wet. Next important thing is counter barriers. Whenever I say contour barriers or contour farming, that means if I have a mountain, parallel to the mountain, I need to go for barriers. So what are the barriers? Stones, grass or soil is usually constructed in such a way that they are parallel. If I have something, I'll have stones, grasses and other things parallel in such a way that if soil is moving, first the stones will stop it. Then even if it moves above and come back, grass will stop it. Again, if it moves above and come back, then there will be other rock boulders or something which will move it or which will prevent it from moving out. Because of this, the retention capacity will be more. This is what we call as contour barriers. Then you can go for rock dams. That is, rocks has to be kept in such a way that, especially dams means water flowing. So whenever there is water which is actually taking the soil and moving down, the rocks has to be constructed in such a way that only water can flow but not the soil, and the soil will be present there, and again this can be distributed in different areas and can be used for cultivation. Then you have terrace farming, that is steps has to be constructed in such a way that the water movement will be slowed down. Guys, please remember that if I have a slope, something like this, water will flow quickly. But now I made it like this. What happens? Water will flow slow. Here it will be fast. Again it will flow slow. If it is like this, it is faster. But if I make the slope gentle, then the movement will be slow. If the movement is slow, erosion is slow. If the movement is fast, erosion is more. That is what we need to avoid. Then you have something called as intercropping. Different crops are grown in alternate rows and are sown at different times to protect soil from rainwash. So if you have certain crops which can hold the soil stronger, sometimes trees are grown in between the cropping lands, just to ensure that the soil is strictly or like strongly kept by the trees. Whenever you have wind or you have water moving, it will prevent the soil to escape. You have counter plowing, that is plowing parallel. Can you see here? Terrace. Can you see here? Parallelly to the slope, you go for plowing. And these are shelter belts. In the coastal and dry regions, rows of trees are planted to check the wind movement to protect soil cover. And when we talk about mangroves, the more mangroves you usually grow, the less impact of tsunami, water, anything whichever comes and moves, it will not allow the wind or water to carry or move fastly, so that the soil will be eroded quickly. In this, they actually give a beautiful example where they show that if water is moving on soil, then the soil erosion will be usually more. But when you have plants, then the amount of soil which is usually carried out by the water is less. This is what we are planning to do with different procedures. So guys, you have to by heart or remember these 7 types which they have given, and whenever they ask you a question and if you can write this, you can score very well. Next you have water, and just see with respect to conservation of water once. Nothing more, and it is also very easy. They are polluted with nitrates, metals and pesticides, so you should ensure that these chemicals are actually removed. And at the same time, effective utilization of water is also required. Whenever you use canals to push the water, then what happens? The fertilizers and all will be carried away by the water. But if you go for sprinkler irrigation or drip irrigation, then water usage will also be improved. At the same time, they do not carry the fertilizers and manures away. Right? So this is very, very important for us. The next important concept is actually with respect to vegetation, wherein do you know they actually talk about vultures. It is believed that vulture is actually dying because of a particular kidney failure. The reason for this is vultures actually depend upon the dead bodies. Whenever they scavenge the livestock, that is animals and all, which are actually treated with diclofenac, a painkiller, which is similar to ibuprofen or aspirin, then usually the vulture is getting kidney failure because of this particular medicine. So this is causing problem. So they may ask you which medicine or what is leading to kidney failure in vultures. So this is very, very important. Then you should be aware about certain organisms which they talk here, but usually the vulnerable, endangered, extinct species, when you talk, the examples that are given here might have changed now. So please refer to the environment and ecology notes of your faculties rather than relying on the NCERT books. And then in the last page you can actually see a glossary about biosphere reserve. What exactly is it? Series of protected areas linked through a global network intended to demonstrate the relationship between conservation and development. In biosphere reserves, we actually protect the organisms and the forest also in such a way that development activities will be avoided in this region and sustainable development will be seen in this region. And then the most important thing that may be asked for you is with respect to CITES. It is an international agreement between governments. They may give CITES is a treaty signed in United Nations. No, it is an international agreement between governments, and its aim is to ensure that international trade in certain species like wild animals and plants, tiger, some medicinal plants and all, does not threaten their survival, because rhinoceros, tiger and other things, whenever you go for trade in these things, usually that endanger those species. So CITES usually try to ensure that between governments, whenever the agreement is being signed, then if you call an organism to be protected under CITES, then that trade is not allowed. And you can sue a country which will allow trade in that particular goods. For example, rhinoceros and tiger is usually being killed in India and it is being exported to Myanmar, Thailand or to China as well. When we come to know that Chinese companies or country is as a whole is purchasing any product of this, then we can actually ask CITES to take action against, and we can stop such trade happening so that there is no market available for such products and the conservation of that will be easy. So in this chapter, these are some of the points that you need to remember. Soil, different types, conservation is very, very important. Apart from that, what you have to see is with respect to CITES. So after this, let's quickly move to next chapter.